welcome to Check Your Leader TV. Today we're just going to have a bit of a sneak peek, a preview of a set of Ancients wargame rules called VEXILLARIUS. Now these have been written by David Brown, the same author of Pickett's Charge, General of the Army, General Army 2, O Group. So you know they're coming from a good stable of rules. They'll be available via Two Fat Lardies or Ricefitz Press. I'm sure you'll be able to get them in other places as well. Release date, I don't know, not too, but they can't be that far off. This is the final version 1.1. So there's been play testing. I was lucky enough to be involved right near the end of the final lot of play testing. So I have some familiarity with the rules. Not that I had that much input. Like I said, they're for the classical ancient period. So we're thinking late Republic, early Imperial Rome, the Greek city-states, the Macedonian Successor Wars, those kind of conflicts. So what we'll do is, I'm not going to play a game, but I'll just go through the mechanisms of VEXILLARIUS, and that will hopefully give you a bit of an idea of what to expect when the rules hit the shelves. Okay, so let's have a look at VEXILLARIUS. Okay, so what do you need to play a game of VEXILLARIUS? So quite obviously you're going to need miniatures. How are your miniatures organised for playing VEXILLARIUS? Well, the units that you manoeuvre on the table are called commands. So for example, here we have a command of companion cavalry. Here we have a phalanx, a pike phalanx command. Here we have a command of Thracian infantry. Here's a command of Roman legionaries. The commands are made up of individual bases, and in this game they are referred to as cohorts. So for example, this cavalry unit of companion cavalry consists of 3 cohorts or bases. Okay, now how many cohorts do you have to a command? Well, if it's a small command, it can have 1 or 2 bases or cohorts. And this is normally, you're thinking about elephants. Elephants tend to be in small commands. It could be a single cohort command, or it might have 2 cohorts in the command. So that's a small command. A standard command is going to have 3 cohorts. So for example, these Thracians here, if it was a standard size unit, it would have 3 cohorts. If it was a large unit, it would have 4. So large units have 4. And finally, there's exceptional size units, and they have 5 cohorts. Exceptional units are, as the name would suggest, they are exceptional, and there's not many of them in a game. But think, generally speaking, something like a large warband host or a very deep hoplite formation. So here we have 2 bases. Here we have a cohort represented by a single base of 4 miniatures. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cohorts. I like my cohorts to be a little bit bigger, so I use 2 bases to represent a cohort. And so 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a large unit, and if it was an exceptional unit, 5. Okay. Formations. There's 3 formations, generally speaking, of in VEXILLARIUS. There's a line formation, a deep formation, and then a wedge or boar's head. So a line formation is when the cohorts are in a single line, side by side. A deep formation is when you have 2 cohorts up and 2 to the rear, in the case of a large unit. In the case of a standard size unit, you would have 2 cohorts forward and then 1 to the rear central. for a wedge formation, for cavalry, a cavalry wedge would have essentially 2 cohorts to the rear and 1 at the head. And you could, if this was a warband cohort and a warband cohort and a warband cohort, that would be a boar's head. Okay, so while we're here, let's have a quick chat about basing, because it's a perennial wargamers issue. Now, straight out of the rules, it states a cohort is easiest if represented by 1 base of figures, but it can be 2 bases of figures depending on your basing style. In effect, 1 base equals a cohort. Example, if your base consists of 4 figures, you could choose to use the basic cohort of a group 2 bases together to represent a cohort of 8 figures. So that's exactly what I've done here. So for example, let's just use these hoplites as an example. So they're based 4 figures to a base, 60 by 20, and you have you could play a game where you go, okay, that is a large unit, like so. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 cohorts, large unit. Or you could just as easily go, well, you know, I'd like my units to look a little bit chunkier, a little bit more heft to them. So 2 bases will represent 1 cohort. So 1 cohort, 1 cohort. It's in deep formation, so there's another 2 there, like so. So 4 cohorts all up. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Whatever basing you have, you can make it work without a problem at all. Now, again, I draw your attention to these pikemen here. What I've done here is I've just simply gone, this will represent a pike phalanx. Now, there's only 2 bases. So 2 bases, 1 base will represent 2 cohorts. So that is a pike phalanx in deep formation, 2 cohorts up, 2 cohorts to the rear. What does that mean if I lose a cohort? Well, in VEXILLARIUS, if you lose a cohort, it's always taken from the rear if it's in a deep formation, and if it's in a line formation, it's taken from the unengaged. You take it from one of the flanks that's unengaged. So I would simply mark this cohort, this half of this base here, representing this left rear or right rear as you look at cohort, has been removed. It can't be counted. It's not part of the combat. So that is now a 3 cohort unit, because I've indicated that this rear half of this base, this 2 cohort base, is been removed. Officers, how you base them is completely up to you, because at the end of the day, you simply state that you're attaching a officer to a base, to a cohort, and then you would just simply place him wherever is appropriate for you to indicate where he is in that formation. I tend to put my army commanders on larger bases, and then my officers or sub-generals on smaller bases. Now, it also should be noted that these rules will cover such things, or they do cover such things as armor class and discipline classes. For example, armor is rated from 1 being, you know, the best armor you can have in the game, down to unarmored, and then there's like 1, 2, 3 unarmored. And there's also discipline classes. You have seasoned troops, drilled troops, semi-drilled, and raw. Okay, but I won't go into too many details about them just now, because like I said, this is just a quick overview, a bit of a glimpse into the rules. Now let's have a look at how the command and control is done in VEXILLARIUS. I should also touch on another element of the rules called stratagems, but we'll get to them in a minute. The first thing I want to do at the moment is I just want to talk about how command and control is exercised in the game. Now, the way this is done is each army has an army commander. This obviously represents you on the battlefield, and at least 2 officers. So here we have an army deployed on the battlefield. You have a pike phalanx, heavy infantry hoplite, pike phalanx to the rear. You have some versatile infantry, in front of a unit of companion cavalry. Over here we have some light infantry, and ahead of them is a small command of elephants. So at the start of the game, you roll to see how many orders you have. The way this is done is quite simply, for every army, for your army general, you get 4 dice to roll, and they should be of one particular color. And then you also get 1 die per officer in your army. So if we have a look here, we have the army commander, so he's going to generate those 4 dice. And then we have an officer over here. Okay, he's attached to this pike phalanx here. And then there's another officer over here. Let's grab this young man. And he will say he's attached to this pike phalanx there. So that command. So the rest of these commands don't have anyone attached. You roll to see how many orders you get. Now, how many orders you get, it's quite simple. For the white dice, the army general's dice, for every 3 up, he'll get an order. And on the red dice, the officers, they generate an order on every 6 that they roll. So let's have a roll here and have a look. Okay, so based on that, we would get 3 army orders. 1, 2, 3, nothing for the 2, and nothing for the double 2 here. But let's assume for a moment that we rolled a 6 there, and this was a 6 as well. Okay, in that case, what we would do is we'd generate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 orders. But because there's a double 6, regardless of the color of the dice, that would generate another order as well. It also, rather than taking an additional order, during a battle, if that was to occur, this would give the army commander the opportunity to do a rally in that phase of the game. Normally rallying is done at the end. I'll talk about sequencing later. But if you roll a double 6 during the order phase and you're in combat and you've got units that have got shock and disorder on them, you can use that to attempt to remove shock and disorder. And sometimes in the game, it's more tactically advantageous for you to use that to remove shock on a unit right at the start of the turn, rather than waiting to the end of the turn to remove the shock. So let's just pretend he's rolled that. So 1, 2, 3 orders, and that gives you another one. That's 4. You record that by placing a die beside the army commander that indicates he has 4 orders. And as he issues orders throughout the game, that gets turned down to 3, issues an order, 2, issues an order, he now has 1. At the end of the turn, an army commander can always carry an order over into the next turn, and that's worth considering because the side with the most orders at the start of a game turn has the initiative. So if he's rolled up 4 orders and he had carried an order over from the last turn, he would actually have 5. If his opponent has 4 orders, because he has more orders, he now has the initiative for that turn. So continuing on with this example here, we're going to assume that the army commander has 5 orders to spend. Now, the sequence of the game is played as follows. You have an order phase, which we've just demonstrated, how you accumulate your orders. You then have a control phase. You then have a charge phase. You have a movement phase, then a missile phase, and then a combat phase, and then a rally phase. So the orders phase is over. We then go to the control phase. Now, in the control phase, what happens is you have to roll to see if your units are under control, if they're actually obeying orders or are willing to obey orders. The way this is done, you don't have to roll for units if the army commander is attached to that unit. So if he was attached to this unit here, this unit would not have to roll. And you don't have to roll for light infantry. So these loose order light infantry at the end there, they're doing their own thing. You don't have to roll for them. But every other unit you have to roll for. The difference is if you have an officer attached to a unit, it gives you a re-roll. You have an option to re-roll the dice that you are landed with. Units will obey orders depending on what they roll. If you roll a 1, the unit goes on to hold orders. In other words, they will not move. They're just holding their ground. 2 through to 5, they'll obey orders. And if it's a 6, they go impetuous. So for an example, these versatile infantry here, 4, they're obeying orders. This companion cavalry wedge of seasoned troops, 5, they're obeying orders. This unit of hoplite in deep formation, 2, they're obeying orders. This pike phalanx command, they're on hold. They've rolled a 1. The next pike phalanx command along, they've got a 6, they're impetuous. And then we have this unit here. Now, if it was in reserve, if it was being held in reserve, you don't have to roll for it, but we're going to pretend it's not in reserve. We're going to assume that it's up in the battle line. 1, it's on hold. Then we have the elephants. We have to roll for the elephants. 3, and they're obeying orders. So that's where we would be at this point. Now we have issues. We have a unit here that's on hold. We have a unit here that's on hold. And we have a unit here that is impetuous. Now there are officers attached. So as a consequence of that, they're able to re-roll their orders. So this unit here, officer attached, re-roll. 3, they're obeying orders. This unit here, impetuous, you might be happy with that. You might not want to re-roll it. But let's assume that we don't want to be impetuous. We re-roll 1. They've gone from impetuous to hold. Okay, so they are now on hold orders. Now, that's not the end of it. What you can do is the army general, I should say, can influence what happens next. Now, because this unit here is drilled, the army officer, by spending 1 signum order, turning that down to a 4, he can simply change that order to obey orders. If these guys were semi-drilled, he would spend the order and then he would get a re-roll. So he would then roll the dice again. And he's got a 6. So they've got impetuous. Now the thing is, he can't alter that order. He's stuck with it. Now he can use as many signum orders as he wants in a single turn, but he can't use it twice on any one unit. And so that's the signum order that the army general can use. He also has another order called officer. So he could use the 3, spend another order, and then he could attempt to send this officer to another unit if he wanted to in this phase, the control phase. Now there's another army commander order that's available as well in the control phase, and that is glory, in which case an army general can attach to a unit for free and take personal command of that unit. So those orders, the signum order, attempting to change an order, a control role, an officer order, and the glory order, those are examples of army general orders. From this point on in the game, there are other orders that can be issued as well. These orders are tactical orders, and they can be issued throughout the game during any phase. Now, on the conclusion of the control phase, the players now move into the remaining phases of the game turn, and during these phases, the player can issue tactical orders to their commands. The way this is done is simply the player states that he's issuing an order of his choice to a command and reduces the army general's order dice by 1 on doing so. The order's unique action is then either automatically carried out in the appropriate phase or will require a D6 roll to be successful as shown in the order details. So the orders that are available, I'll give you an example. One order that you could use is Clash of Shields. It costs 1 order, and that's issued for units in the charge and combat phase. They will give extra combat bonuses to a unit. Then, of course, there's another order called Omens. Again, it costs 1 order. It's used in the charge and missile phase. On receipt of the order, a missile command re-rolls all D6 from 1 attack. You re-roll all the dice, not just the misses, but it's not applicable to the use of peeler by Romans, or, well, because Romans aren't the only troops that had peeler. But anyway, I digress. And then there's a rally order. A rally order permits an army general and an officer one rally attempt each, or permits two officers a rally attempt each. Each command is still limited to one rally attempt per turn. Now this is simply based on the unit's training or discipliner, or you roll a die, and generally speaking a 6 will always pass, but if the troops are poor quality you might need to roll a 4+ as opposed to a 3+ for better quality troops. And so these orders are used throughout the game, and each time they're issued, these tactical orders are issued, the command die is turned down and down until there's none left. What can be done, however, is an army commander can always carry one order over until into the next turn. So that's how orders are issued. Now, the only other thing I want to talk about in this video is stratagems. Now, at the start of any game, generally speaking, you're going to end up with two stratagems. There's two types of army generals. There's superior army generals and there is experienced army generals. Now, your superior army generals, their advantage is when they select their stratagems at the start of the game, they can choose two stratagems from either the strategic or strategy orders section or the tactical orders section. I should state that stratagems are divided into two types, strategy and tactics. Essentially, the experienced army generals, they pick one from each. The superior army generals, they can pick two from either or one from each. The other thing that a superior army general gains as well is a free VEXILLARIUS order. Now, what a VEXILLARIUS order is essentially it gives them a free reroll in the control phase. So it's an order only available to a superior army general. They get it's a free stratagem. It permits one free control reroll for one command each and every turn. Okay. The stratagems, like I said, there's stratagems and there are tactical stratagems. The strategy stratagems are used during the deployment phase of the game, so when you're setting up. I won't go into details about setting up, but suffice to say there are rules that cover scouting and terrain placement. Essentially, the battlefield is divided into sectors, and at the start of the game you roll dice to see what kind of terrain are in those sectors, and if you out-scout your opponent, you're more likely to be able to affect what kind of terrain is there. Also, these stratagems can affect or give you advantages during deployment. The other type of stratagems are tactical or tactics stratagems, and these are stratagems that will help you in the actual battle. Such things as, I'll give you an example of just one. Missile Storm, you gain 4 free Omens orders. Omens orders are basically those orders that are used throughout the game, those tactical orders that are used throughout the game, and they are used to improve or re-roll shooting dice that you've rolled, and then you might not be happy with the result, so you gather up your dice and you re-roll them all again. So that's just one of the tactical stratagems that you can use. And there's about all up the stratagems. There's 8, and the tactical stratagems again there's about 8. the Caesar's Council. You'll find throughout the rules there's these notes called Caesar's Council, the tips and advice, and one of them here is Caesar's Council. Players should select their stratagems wisely and to support their battle plan, as a well-placed stratagem can help turn a battle in your favour. So that covers orders and how they're delivered, how they're generated. We've talked briefly about stratagems, both strategy and tactics. The only other thing to discuss, I think, at this stage is the shooting and the combat method and how that's resolved in VEXILLARIUS. Okay, so let's talk about shooting and how it's conducted in VEXILLARIUS. Essentially, the way it works is for every command that's shooting, you get a casualty dice. You then get a casualty dice for each cohort involved. So in this case, we've got a light infantry unit in cover, shooting at some close order bowmen. The light infantry have already suffered 2 shock from previous encounters. So they get 1 for the unit and then 1 for each cohort, so that's 3. There are also other modifiers, and in this case, they have a modifier because those guys are classed as unarmored, so they get another 1. So they've got their 5 dice. They hit on 4 5s and 6s. And so they've rolled 1, 2, 3 and missed with these guys here. So they've got 3 hits, which equates to 1 casualty. These guys are now going to shoot back. Just like these chaps, they get 1 for the unit. They're close order bow, so they get 1 for each cohort. So there's 4 cohorts there. So that's another 4. They get 1 for close order bowman shooting, and if they were at the 3-inch mark, they would get another 2. But they're not, so they'll just get another 1. Also, these guys are unarmored, so they get another 1. However, they are shooting at troops in cover, so they lose 1. So it's 6 dice, and they've got a double 6, and the rest were misses. Okay, now if they used the Omens token, they could go, I'm not happy with that, I want to re-roll it all, and then they would have to ignore the double 6, they'd gather all their dice up and they'd throw them again. But you know what, they're quite happy with that, because the double 6, well, that's a hit and that's a hit. So that's 2 hits, 1 casualty, that's 3 hits all up. 3 hits, 3 shock is enough to remove a base from a light infantry cohort. So that would remove that base. If the shooting was done in reverse order, if they had shot first, this base, the way I do it is I simply turn it around. I then allow it, when it's the light infantry unit's turn to fire, they then fire. You count the unit that the cohort has been lost, and at the conclusion of firing, it's removed. In other words, shooting is simultaneous. So you can basically start from one side of the table and go across. The initiative doesn't really matter in the shooting phase. Now, if these guys were armored 2 or 3, a double 6 inflicts another casualty on them. I've misspoken there. It's another hit, not another casualty, another hit. But because these are unarmored, the double 6 doesn't affect them. And that's how shooting's done. It's pretty straightforward, and that's, I keep saying shooting, but in the rules it's referred to as the missile phase. Let's now have a look at how charges are done. We'll do the charge and the combat. In this situation we have companion cavalry, so they're classed as heavy cavalry. They're seasoned and they're charging some versatile infantry in open. So each unit starts with 2 dice in the charge, and then they have advantages that they add or subtract. These guys, the companions, they've got their 2 dice. They're seasoned, so they get that. And they'll get another one. They're heavy cavalry in their first charge of the game, so that's another one there. So they've got 4. These guys have got 2, and there are no other advantages going their way. Now what happens is you simply roll the dice, and we're looking for 4 pluses. So these guys here, they get no hits at all. And these guys here, they get 1. So they're 1 by 1. So the attacker wins by 1 or 2. They close to combat, and the enemy suffers 1 shock. So you just place that to the rear, and in they go. The rest of the phases of the game would then be carried out. And so eventually, let's say we get to the combat phase. Now, combats are done by cohort. So you fight a combat here, a combat here, a combat here. This cohort doesn't have anyone facing them, so they will count as an overlap for this cohort here. So let's go through the combat phase so you can see how that works, because it's quite unique and different. And the combat phase is basically done, you fight a series of combats, and then you total up the number of cohort victories to determine the overall victor. So you go by cohort, and we'll look at the companions first. So how many dice do they get? They are heavy cavalry, and it's in the first round of combat, so they get 5 dice per cohort. They don't have a general or an officer attached. They don't have Clash of Shields. That's one of those tactical orders that they could have, but they are seasoned, so they get another 1. It's not a rear attack, and it's not disordered, or they're not disordered or flanked, so they don't lose any dice there. Cavalry, if they had a greater frontage, they would get an extra CD. They don't. So that's basically it for them. So we'll do these guys first by way of example. And they're hitting on 4, 5s, and 6s. So they've got 3 hits there on these guys. Now, countering them, you have 5 dice for versatile infantry. So versatile infantry in the first round, they get 5 CDs. So they've got 5. They don't have an officer attached, no Clash of Shield. They're not seasoned. They're not got a rear attack happening, or they're not disordered or flanked. But they do have greater frontage, so they gain a CD for this cohort here, this cohort battle. They roll looking for 5s and 6s, 4 5s and 6s, I should say, and they've inflicted 2 hits. So this cohort, in this battle here, we have a cohort victory by 1. So if they win that particular cohort victory, then what they do is they inflict a point of shock on their opponent. So they'll take a point of shock. Then we move across to the next one. Again, these guys, they'll start with 5. There's no other pluses, no other minuses. That's all they get. These guys, again, they start with 5, but they also get cavalry charging and heavy cavalry charging in the first round of combat, and they're seasoned. These guys here, they've inflicted 2 hits on these guys. And these guys, 1, 2, 3, and a double 6 gives them an additional hit. So 1, 2, 3, 4 hits to 2. So again, they've won that cohort combat by 4 hits to 2. It's a difference of 1 or 2. So they get another hit there. So what's important to note here is that whoever scores the most hits wins the cohort combat. And if you win the cohort combat, you inflict a point of shock on the enemy. If you draw the cohort combat, you both take 1 shock. And if you win the cohort combat by more than, or by 5 or more, you inflict 2 shock. And then this one here, it's exactly the same as the other one. So if I remember correctly, that was 5v6. So they've got their 5 in their first round of combat, and they've inflicted 2 hits again. And these guys are coming back with their 5, 1 for seasoned and 1 for heavy cavalry. They're 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 hits, but there's a double 6, so that's 5. So when they get to 5 hits, they actually inflict 2 shock. So they've had a victory here, a victory here, a victory here. Okay, so we've resolved all the combats. We then tally up the cohort victories. Like I said, it's 3-0. Regardless, the other thing we have to do is remove cohort casualties. So for every four casualties, the versatile infantry loses a cohort. So you take it from either, if they were in depth formation, you would take it from the rear one, but they're not. So you take it from the unengaged flank. So they've lost their overlap advantage. Okay, you remove then the 4 casualties, shock markers. They still have 1 shock on them. Now then you consult how many victories. So the command combat result table you would look at, and these guys have won by 2 or more cohort victories. It was 3 cohort victories. So 2 or more. The defeated enemy, they roll their infantry. So they roll their disordered and they withdraw 2d6 inches. So they would go back 10 inches. So you would then measure 10 inches and move them back. And let's just say this is 10 inches here. The next thing you do is you roll for the victors, their follow-up roll. The cavalry, they roll 4d6. Now, they've gone 10. If they roll 10 or more, 5, 9, 14, what that means is their roll is higher than theirs and they inflict an additional shock. They follow up but stop 3 inches short. And that is how combat is done. Okay, so that's our brief sneak peek intro to VEXILLARIUS. There's a lot more to the rules, obviously, but I think there's enough there to whet your appetite. Going forward, I might play a game of VEXILLARIUS in the next few days, and if I do, I will video it, and at least parts of it, and I'll upload that for you to have a look at as well. But essentially, I really like VEXILLARIUS. What I've discovered in the multiple games I've played so far is that what you find as the commander is you're constantly having to decide your orders, your tactical orders. Do you use them to maximize damage upon your opponent, or do you keep them to minimize damage on your own troops? Because that rally ability to remove shock from troops, remove disorder, is invaluable to keep units in the fight. But at the same time, you want to use tactical orders to get those clash of shields or those omens where you can inflict damage upon the enemy. So you have that nice command decisions that you have to make in deciding what you want to do with your oh so limited orders, because you'll never have enough to do everything that you want. But anyway, that's enough for now. That's VEXILLARIUS. When will it be released? Not in the not too distant future, I would suggest. I know that Dave is already looking at gathering things like photos of games and that to add in to the publication, so it can't be far away now. So if you've got any comments, please like, share and subscribe. I won't be able to say that categorically I got everything, I've explained everything right there, and like I said, things might change before the rules are published, but I think I've done I've covered things correctly. Regardless, you would certainly have a good feel for the game, I think, at this point. So with that said, I'm going to wrap it up there. Like, share and subscribe, and if you find this kind of content useful, please let me know and I can keep producing more of it. And that's all for now.